So I just got done putting the rear diff, the springs, hooking up the brake lines and e-brake lines, or brake line and e-brake lines. And I'm about ready to throw some tires on it. And I can set the rear down and see how much lower it is. Just a little bit. Well, if you remember where we were sitting before we started lowering it, that's the front, haven't touched yet. And I pan back here to the rear, you can see how much lower that rear is. It's down quite a ways. That's gonna sit pretty nice. And then, of course, we'll get the front down there, and it'll be 5 inches or so. Hopefully it's at least 5 inches, so it looks right. I'm gonna have to figure something else out. Well, the front end parts showed up. We can get going on this. I'm kind of excited to get moving on it. So we have a drop spindle on this side. They're marked which side they go on, which is nice, in case you get confused. The quality of this actually seems pretty good. I don't see anything really concerning about it. We'll strip this thing down, and we're going to cut one coil, which will be 2 inches, and these are 3-inch drop spindles. That way it should be a good 5 to match the rear. The shocks, we're still going to use regular length shocks on the front and put the brackets, aftermarket brackets I bought for it. We'll get those on there. And while I'm doing this, we will clean it up, wire wheel it, scrape it, wire brush, whatever's necessary, and we'll paint it, and we'll put it all back together, and it'll look really good. So that's kind of where we're going. There's a few things here I wanted to show you that needs some attention while you're working on it. One of the things we need to address and talk about is this spindle's been relocated along with the caliper mount. So your wheel and the caliper and everything has been moved up. Well, if you look at this and you move all this up, there's plenty of room for it. One of the things that need to be addressed is, it's a line here, is this brake line right here. When it is actually moved, it's going to move up this far. That brake line coming around here is going to actually be right about here. So we need to be aware of that. If you know, if you're doing I guess 2.5 to 3, it's going to put it right into this upper control arm. So to start with, if you give that a little bit of a little more bend, and you make this bend a little bit tighter and bring this down this way, then that will clear a little bit more, but not just bending it, but bending it down and out. And you see how dirty and grungy this is? That's what I'm talking about. You're gonna have to clean it up a little bit just to get the cotter pins out. Can't really see them with the light here. The cotter pins got some grime and stuff on them. I already started to open that, and I thought I better address this, show this to you guys. So there's a few things you need to pay attention to as you're going along here. What the heck? My light won't stick. Okay. And then, of course, we're going to get that sway bar out of there to start with. Get that out, completely out of the way. And you'll need a floor jack, set her up on jack stands where she's safe. And we'll get the floor jack underneath this lower control arm when we're ready to start knocking these upper and lower ball joints loose. But you see how gross that is? Obviously this is going to be replaced, but you want to take the time and do a nice job so when you're showing your rig off to somebody, they're not overshadowed by all this grime and grease. Another thing, if you've never really messed with these that much, and that'll just pinch it just enough to pinch off the fluid, not crush and destroy that hose. Obviously, we're dropping that spring, cutting that spring 2 inches. It's going to change your suspension travel area. You'll have to do an alignment, which means probably more shims. So plan on that when you're done. It may drive okay, but if you put brand new tires on, it might wear your tires out. I think that's about the only thing I want to address. Oh, one other thing. These Chevys and GMCs, there are, if you go and look these parts up, it'll say 1 inch or 1.25 inch thickness on these rotors. Pay close attention to that because it will affect the length of your spindle and the diameter for the bearing. So be aware of that. That's a time saver. Pretty easy. You got to pull the wheel off, but it's pretty easy to take a measurement of that rotor and you'll know what you're dealing with. And anyhow, so we'll get going on that, cleaning this up. Pull the coil out. We'll cut one coil off and we'll be good. Okay, so what I'll do is just break these nuts loose. I won't take them all the way off. That way when this does pop loose, it's not going to send parts flying everywhere. You don't want to get hurt doing this. It's not worth it. You keep these nuts on there most of the way. Just give it enough room to, when you go to pop it loose, that it can give. And most of the time they'll pop loose pretty easy. You'll have to beat on them a little bit. I like to, like you saw, use a hammer. It doesn't really damage the spindle. Depending on how you're doing it, you're not gonna hurt a thing. You might leave a few marks where you hammered on it, but that's okay. If you use a pickle fork, you're probably going to damage your ball joint, or at minimum your boot around it. You've got to replace the boot. You'll want to replace the boot. Like I say, I'm just going to back these off a few turns. Keep a few threads on there. You'll be able to see when it does pop loose. Find a good solid spot to strike. floor. Same on this side. Don't start pulling it off there yet. Put a jack underneath it. Keep it safe. And one thing when you're going to put these back together, go ahead and take the time, repack the bearings, replace the seals. You'll be glad you did. Otherwise you'll be back into it and not too much time. Always seems like that's what happens. Just like that. There, we could lower this jack down and pry that spring out. Kind of do it slow. You don't know what's going to happen. Okay, pry bar. Well, okay. So as far as suspension goes, that's pretty much all we have to do. Like I say, I'm going to clean this up and paint it. We'll take this over to the vise, and I'll just make one cut right here and put it right back in the same location it was. How it was kind of clocked into this little pocket here. And that way it'll keep everything even on both sides. You could put it in and not get it clocked and it'll work. But it won't be even on either side, because just getting it out of that pocket just a little bit could throw it off a ½ inch, even maybe a full inch, I don't know. But you don't want to have your pickup all lopsided. So we'll get over there, cut this off. We'll clean this up and paint it. We'll clean all that up and paint it, start putting her back together. Also on this spindle, can't see it there. This spindle, we're going to reuse the rotor on this, obviously, in this backing plate. See it? There we go. And the backing plate. Other than that, this spindle here you can discard, save it for later, give it to your friend, make a boat anchor, whatever. Maybe you can sell it. But that's pretty much all you're going to need off of that old spindle is the rotor and backing plate, which will bolt right onto the new spindle and look like new. So we'll get going on this. There, so I don't know if you can see how much cleaner that looks. It's not perfect by any means, but it'll look good. Get some paint on it and give her a spit shine. She'll look nice. So here's a shot of what it was. I spent, I don't know, a couple hours doing all the cleanup, painting things. Kind of detailing, making things look good or better. Not necessarily great, but my thinking is, if you're going to be into something and change the front end parts like this, you might as well spend a little time, make it look decent. I still got to put shocks on it. I'll throw my tires on it, set it on the ground, and we'll get an after measurement with the whole thing sitting on the floor. Now we're at 25, just a hair over 25. And before we were 29 and a half. And we're 25, pretty close to 5 inches. And that will settle, I'm sure, some. Get to moving around, get it all settled out. So I like it. I like how low it is. I'm concerned that maybe the front's still a little high. When we finally get the tires and wheels on it, we'll take another look at it and see if we need to lower the front a little more. But anyhow, that's that. A couple of things I didn't mention or we need to talk about. The wheels on this are a 4.5 inch backspace. There was too much backspace actually. So you need to have a wheel that is 4 inch or less. 3.5 would be excellent. This wheel here, on the way it's sitting, I had to put a 1/2 inch spacer in there to get that wheel out far enough where it wasn't dragging on the lower control arm. And the other side had a tendency to drag on the caliper. So you need to be aware of that. The other thing I mentioned earlier when talking about getting the spring indexed in the pocket or in the pocket mount right, the lower control arm, well, also make sure you clock it into the pocket, the center of that upper pocket correctly. When I set this down, I went to take a measurement. You guys didn't see it, and I was baffled at why this side was sitting higher, about 1 inch higher, maybe 1.5 inches. And I couldn't figure out why. I thought I had that spring up in the pocket correctly, centered, and it wasn't. It was offset, so it was riding on top of that index in that upper pocket. So double check that. It's kind of a pain. It's not horrible, but it's kind of a pain to have to go back and straighten things out when you thought you were done. So wheels, wheel backspace, and your spring locations. Make sure it's all centered up in there. I don't think there's anything else I needed to mention in the afterthoughts. After this is all done, we will start on the bed project. We'll get the bed pulled off and start doing the frame shortening, getting that all measured out. And then following that, we'll be doing body work and repairing rust, replacing panels. We'll have the whole front quarter off, front clip off, and while I have that off, I will change the tranny, and I'll just pull the whole motor and all, and we'll go through the motor. It's a good motor, it's a good running motor, but I always like to replace the gaskets and seals. Nobody likes a leaky pickup or leaky car in their shops. So we'll get that out, cleaned up. I'll finish the work on the bay, painting the frame up while there's no motor in there, cleaning everything up. And what else was there? I think that's it. Because anyhow, we got a long ways to go. It'll be all winter, and so we'll be seeing you.